this session of the Standing Committee on Industry and Technology. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Wednesday, January 26, 2022, the committee is meeting to study the sourcing and processing of critical minerals. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, pursuant to the House Order of November the 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. And so to my colleagues in Ottawa in person, you know the rules, and so please proceed accordingly. I'd like to thank the witnesses who are with us on behalf of the committee. Some of you answered our call at the very last minute, and we very much appreciate this. So with us today we have David Bilodeau, Senior Director, Natural Resources, Environment and Sustainability for the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for being here. And then we have Patrick Gervais, Vice President, Marketing Communications of Lyon Electric. And for the town of Malartic, we have Martin Ferron, Mayor and Prefect from the MRC of Vallée de l'Or. Thank you for being with us. Without any further ado, then, you have 5 minutes each, and we'd invite you to present what you have to say to us, beginning with Mr. Bilodeau. 5 minutes.
Great. Well, Mr. Chair, honorable members, thank you for the opportunity to attend today's discussion on critical minerals in Canada. As noted during the introduction, my name is David Bilodeau. I serve as the Senior Director of Natural Resources, Environment and Sustainability at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. The Canadian Chamber recently launched its Critical Minerals Council, which is co-chaired by Teck Resources and Toyota Canada, and brings together over 20 members from upstream and downstream corporations, academic institutions, as well as industry and indigenous associations. Together, the Council is focused on enhancing touch points between domestic mining and manufacturing companies, economic and environmental ambitions, and indigenous and industry stakeholders. In so doing, we hope to encourage the sustainable development of critical mineral supply chains in Canada and provide global markets with the resources required to transition to a low-carbon future. According to the International Energy Agency, the average electric vehicle can require 6 times the amount of minerals as a conventional car, as well as materials like nickel, cobalt, and lithium that a conventional vehicle typically doesn't require. Another example, wind plants need up to 9 times more mineral resources than a gas-fired plant. In other words, the transition to a net zero future hinges on the availability of critical minerals. Similarly, critical minerals are essential for food security, as the continued production and supply of minerals like potash are vital for crop production and quality. With this increasing demand in mind, the Canadian Chamber believes that an effective critical mineral strategy will unlock significant opportunities for Canada, which I would like to briefly highlight for you today. First, growing domestic supply chains will reduce Canadian dependence on imports. Per the Center for Strategic and International Studies, China provides more than 85% of the world's rare earths and is a primary global supplier of minerals that are essential for digital and green energy infrastructure. Our economic and environmental ambitions shouldn't hinge on importing critical minerals from any one country, particularly when we have abundant reserves here at home. We must develop our supply chains, work with our allies to advance shared interests and resiliency, and create domestic strategic mineral stockpiles. Second, Canada has growing international market opportunities. And to match domestic critical mineral production with increasing global demand, it's important to focus attention on facilitating resource development here in Canada, where it takes an average of over 15 years to move mining projects from discovery to first production. These lead times will impact Canada's decarbonization efforts while limiting international market opportunities. Accordingly, we must work with a spectrum of stakeholders to determine how to responsibly expedite development, inclusive of securing venture capital for early stage projects. And third, our critical mineral strategy can create transformative economic opportunities that facilitate Indigenous partnerships, reconciliation, and self-determination. Moreover, through collaboration with Indigenous communities, universities, and industry, the Government of Canada has an opportunity to de-risk investments that will address the social and physical infrastructure deficits in remote communities. With these opportunities in mind, we encourage the Government of Canada to deploy a critical minerals strategy that creates a cost-competitive business environment with regulatory certainty, develops domestic processing capabilities by facilitating new investment, refurbishing existing infrastructure, and partnering with local communities, and provides an accurate critical mineral inventory and forecast demand over the next 15 years. Executing an effective critical mineral strategy is key to reinforcing Canada's global brand as a secure and sustainable supplier, as well as supporting domestic and international low carbon transitions and food security. Thanks again for your time and consideration, and I look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bilodeau. I'll now move to Mr. Gervais from Lyon Electric. The floor is yours.
Monsieur le Président.
Chair, honorable members, thanks to all of you for hearing from me today. Lion Electric is a manufacturer of 100% heavy vehicles, 100% electric. We're most known for our school buses, but we also make minibuses for shuttles and adapted transport. In addition, we manufacture heavy trucks, class 5 to 8, used for various purposes, such as lift trucks as well. Lyon contributes to the entire battery ecosystem. Batteries are the very heart of our vehicles. Last year, Lyon announced that we are going to be building a battery plant in Mirabel. It's going to be opening in the latter half of 2022. The plant is going to produce 5 gigawatt hours per year. That's the equivalent of 14,000 100% electric heavy vehicles to be used for vehicles in Canada and in the USA. It's going to be a highly automated plant. And as you know, there are 3 major components in the battery. First is the cell, the second is the module, and the third is the battery pack. At Lyon, we have battery packs. We're going to be having modules with battery packs. We have to buy the cells. Our goal is to strengthen the whole ecosystem for battery manufacturing here in Canada. We have several advantages. We have natural resources. We have green energy. We also have business intelligence here, which is exceptional. We're leaders in North America, if not in the world, when it comes to development. And with all the natural resources that we have, it's extraordinary. But the weak link in the chain is the cell. So what we want is to be able to develop intelligence here in Quebec and in Canada to become a world leader. To become a world leader and be able to exploit all of our critical minerals, we need a cell supplier. Right now at Lyon, we have to turn to overseas companies, especially in Asia and Europe. If there were a way of having a cell manufacturer here, we would probably be one of their biggest customers, buying the most cells in Canada and possibly even in North America. It's important to develop the whole supply chain, specifically when it comes to critical minerals, to be able to be masters of our own house. The electrification industry is expanding fully, and it's a race. All countries are expanding, and the competition is fierce. So to be able to have development and supply be local is consistent with our purpose, which is to reduce greenhouse gases, and we'll become less dependent on imports and all of the problems that there could be with supply chains. We also want to retain our expertise. It's important to keep it here. I think that we can develop a level of intelligence. We're innovative as a country, and we should be able to put all of our savoir-faire to work for us to be able to keep our expertise here. Of course, that demand in Canada isn't big enough to be able to have us serve just the local market. But by having people who are highly innovative with intelligence will be able to develop new ways of proceeding which will set us apart internationally. Right now at Lyon, we work with over 500 suppliers. Most of the components for our vehicles come from Canadian suppliers, and that's very important to us, especially given our growth through North America and into international markets. The challenge, of course, is how to work through this supply chain and how to always have the critical components for our vehicles. We're still operating in a price fluctuation environment, and we're going to probably see a similar situation in 2022. And so it's all the more important to develop our supply chains and have local players, especially when it comes to developing the battery ecosystem. We want there to be rules and incentives to attract outside companies to have them set up shop here. And also for our local companies, we want them to be able to be stimulated to developing our products. So the lowest bidder is an innovation killer. We want industries to be able to focus on innovation. And we have to be able to have regulations on our side to promote product development locally in Canada. Mr. Juvin, I'm going to have to ask you to conclude. We're already just over the time. Sorry, okay. We feel that the ecosystem is extremely important, and the battery sector is critical if we want to become independent and vertically integrate all of the products when it comes to electrification from transportation in Canada. Thank you very much. And now I turn the floor over to Mr. Ferron. 5 minutes. You have the floor. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to share with you some realities of the mining milieu in which my city, Malartic, and Abitibi-Témiscamingue is experiencing. One of our great sources of wealth in the country is our natural resources, and we have all kinds of resources here. In Abitibi-Témiscamingue, we have mines, not just gold mines. There are also multiple metal mines as well as rare earths, lithium, and even recently, CNA, an Australian company, has acquired a second lithium deposit, which is of great concern in Abitibi-Témiscamingue, where the outside acquisition of businesses and also for innovative mining companies, we call this the mining sector. These companies are innovative and they've developed expertise in various domains. For example, processing effluents from the mines, mining residues, cleaning them up, whether it's operating, whether it's processing of certain products. We've developed knowledge and expertise that is world-renowned. So we're fortunate to have these companies here, and they're critical. These are companies who make it possible for the mining milieu to develop at a very high speed and to acquire new ways of operating and developing intelligent mines. In other words, smart mines. We're talking about using technology, which is used in mines, not just male and females working with picks. Technology is present and has been developed here in the regions, largely in Abitibi-Témiscamingue, in our case, in northern Quebec as well. We have companies who are worthy of our attention when it comes to developing strategic metals and the whole industry that's going to be created around them. It's also important to recognize that these are dynamic milieus. When we talk about land use, we have to be able to keep certain areas alive. We don't want everything to be centralized around big cities, but also to develop around these companies and these mines, which will bring wealth, but also allow for economic diversification through processing, the secondary and tertiary processing. This is indispensable for the development of the regions which are further away from the major centers. It's very important to prevent our milieus that are farther and more remote from disintegrating. And also, there's the whole issue of the First Nations. It's essential to today in Abitibi-Témiscamingue as elsewhere in northern Quebec and all throughout Canada. When there are strategic metals and mines which are starting up, or before starting up, when there's consultation. In the past, this was often neglected. But now the First Nations are very attentive and alert to this, and they're asking to be partners, and they're right to do so. They want to be consulted. They want an opportunity to develop as well through this sector and through this natural resource, which brings a lot of money into these companies, but First Nations can also benefit to develop, have jobs, receive training. There have been several interesting agreements between mining companies and the Algonquin First Nations, as well as Cree in northern Quebec. This is a key tool to ensure this communication and work between First Nations peoples and mining companies who will be looking for natural resources in the ancestral lands of the First Nations. And so this is a tool for development. Likewise, for host communities, such as in Malarctic, we have a cohabitation guide that was created with one of the biggest mining companies in Canada, right next to our municipality here, which makes it possible to communicate with the municipality when it comes to sustainable development, social acceptability. This has to be done in advance and not after the mine opens, as was the case here. We've had the experience of having to live with a mine downtown. We have to find ways to respect the milieu and to help development, to create wealth, and to help the sector. The battery sector is going to be created over the next few years, and there's all kinds of expertise coming in with that. For example, there's the University of Quebec in Abitibi-Témiscamingue, which has research chairs in the mining field. For example, in residue processing. This is very important for the environment. Mines can be highly polluting, and we've seen this in the past. Today, we've developed strategies and modern techniques to be able to mitigate the impacts of mining, or at least to offset them. But this is something that's done through innovation. So regional development and the nation's development depends on new technologies, but also on the way it's used. And companies have to be take the first steps to work with their host communities and the First Nations and the mining sector, which is already here in place with tremendous expertise to assist in this development for the future. Thank you very much, Mr. Ferron. We're very thankful for you here. For the benefit of my colleagues, when I show this yellow card, this means 1 minute's left, and when I show the red card, it means that your time is up and you need to conclude. So today we have time for 2 rounds of questions. Let's begin without any further ado with Mr. Généreux, 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thanks to our witnesses for being here today. I'd like to begin with Mr. Ferron. Thank you for being here today, Martin. We know each other. We're not going to hide that fact. We know each other quite well. Martin, you were talking about the sector. Is the critical mineral sector or the sector present around you, do they have any particular demands or requests of the government, be it Quebec or Ottawa? Or are you already receiving assistance by governments right now in mining? Mining, depending on the companies, receives grants. Some have developed so much expertise in specific areas. For example, they export. They received export assistance to be able to share with other countries the knowledge that they have developed. What's of concern is that these companies are small companies, so they can be bought up quickly and with their high tech. For example, when it comes to processing residues and contaminants, there's all kinds of strategies that have been developed. Or multimedia companies, multimedia use for high tech in mining operations, and they can be bought up quickly. And they can move into the hands of other countries and other governments. So when you see those companies who are, our pride and joy, and we see them being bought up by other countries, it's of concern for the future development of the regions here. The acquisition by an Australian company, the Australian company bought a company, one of the companies in your area in recent months or in the last year. How is that perceived in the milieu? Well, this is an Australian company. I don't think the problem was that it was Australian. But what it was of concern is this company aware of our realities here? What about our First Nations? Is the company familiar with the approach that's required with our municipalities that they're going to be impacting economically, environmentally, from a human resource point of view? See, because this could strip a lot of businesses who are already short of labor, and this could cause another problem. So there are a lot of challenges that these companies have to be made aware of. I think that people maybe trust an Australian company perhaps more than a company from some other region of the world that may be more problematic, that may be part of the Commonwealth. Australia is part of the Commonwealth, but perhaps there are other companies. You mean Chinese? Mr. Gervais, batteries and battery components. You talked about cells. I understand that the plant you're opening in Mirabel shortly is going to be a plant assembling batteries. There will be assembling batteries and not actually completely building the components. Am I correct? Well, in part, there are 2 out of the 3 components that are going to be assembled. The critical component is the cell, and that is going to be purchased. Right now, we're buying it from companies in Asia or in Europe. Negotiations are currently underway with companies who are intending to establish themselves here in Canada, and if that comes to be, we will probably be one of the biggest purchasers because technology moves so quickly. Right now, we're talking about lithium-ion batteries, and right now we'll be using 21700s, which are roughly the same as what Tesla's using. They look like small AAA batteries, but things are changing. We're using 16850s and components which are solid state, and that may change. So we can adapt to whatever the technology is. Mr. Gervais, you talked about the fact that in Canada we have what's necessary to create the whole battery, if I've understood you correctly. Do you see Canada being able to develop all cells here in Canada within a certain amount of time, where the missing element in building a complete battery? Is this something that you have an idea about? What is possible? Well, I think that we can. I think companies such as Strumvolt is intending to set up shop here. There's also British Volt that wants to manufacture cells here in Canada. We're missing these players. You know, I'm chair of Accelerate, which is an organization recently created to accelerate development of the supply chain for electrification, and not just for road transit, but all transportation. So to have a player to process the critical minerals into cells is the only missing link in the chain so that we could become a pioneer and a leader in Canada. So when you see mines that are not necessarily in Canada, such as lithium-ion that was sold, or neolithium that was sold recently to Argentina, but that has a kind of lithium that can be processed in Canada. What's your take on that Canada allows the sale of Canadian assets, even if they're not in Canada, but they're necessary to effect this transformation to electrification? Well, look, we're in favor of developing Canadian businesses, of course. We want Canadian business to stay here. We want the companies to be Canadian-owned, and we also want to develop the complete supply chain here in Canada. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Généreux. That's all your time. And now I turn the floor over to Mr. Fillmore for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and I apologize should I drop the call. My internet connection has just become unstable in the last couple of moments here. So if I should disappear, another member will step in and use the time. I think I've got 6 minutes. I'd like to divide it equally, if I could, between between two of our witnesses today, who, by the way, I thank you very much for your time, Mr. Bilodeau and Monsieur Gervais. So I'll start with Mr. Bilodeau. So, Mr. Bilodeau, you, as you've said, critical minerals are an absolutely key component of the green transition around the world, and the government is eager to position Canada and Canadian businesses such that we can make the most of this massive opportunity. It's a global competition. The race is on. From your position at the Chamber of Commerce, what do your members? What's the sort of the raw news that you hear from your members? What is needed to ensure that Canada remains competitive with regard to critical minerals?
Well, I think that's quite the loaded question, and I thank you for it. And I think there's a number of issues that have been well documented over the years within the Canadian mining sector, and primarily the industry faces three key issues that need to be resolved for Canada to really advance its critical mineral strategy. And first, it's both very difficult and costly for critical mineral deposits to identify critical mineral deposits, which are often located in remote regions. So Canada's natural resources industry remains relatively underdeveloped, as there is limited exploratory work being conducted. Second, while southern parts of Canada have been mined for a number of years, the real opportunity for Canada to become a major critical mineral supplier globally requires development of these remote northern regions of the country where there's a considerable lack of supporting infrastructure. And lastly, underscoring all of these issues, the mining sector, of course, faces economic challenges. The immense capital costs of extraction, coupled with volatility of resource prices, creates significant challenges for creating conditions conducive to investment. So I think that we have to think strategically. We have to couple a lot of Canada's strategic plans, including coupling our critical minerals strategy with our net zero strategy to deploy decarbonizing green technologies across Canada, particularly in northern Canada, to become a global player on the world stage here.
Okay, thank you for that. So I want to shift to environment for a moment. When demand for natural resources surges, we've got to keep sustainability front of mind. So it's really important in that rush to capitalize on the opportunity that we keep a grip on the environmental impact of the extraction and processing. What role do you think Canada can play in making sure that sustainability is front of mind while also remaining competitive? What role do you think we can play, or what are you hearing from your members on that front?
So I think it's important to note that sustainability and economic competitiveness are tethered. You can't compete without a strong sustainability program in this sector. And looking through a global lens, it's clear that the Canadian mining industry practices the highest environmental standards and harbors a meaningful commitment to sustainable development and production. I hope that kind of addresses part of your question, and maybe I'll just build a bit on my prior comment. And to further improve the environmental performance in the sector, the Chamber believes, again, that connecting the critical mineral strategy and net zero strategy unlocks a lot of potential. The Chamber in particular and our members would like to see the deployment of different decarbonizing technologies inclusive of small modular reactors, hydrogen, and renewables such as solar and wind, as these technologies are vital not only for Canada's transition to net zero, but they're also vital to powering the sustainable operations of critical mineral supply chains. And an effective coupling of these two strategies will not only reduce the environmental impact of mining, it also holds the potential of reducing operating costs, which in turn would support continued investment in the space.
Okay, thank you very much. That's extremely concise and very, very helpful. I'm going to switch now to Monsieur Gervais, if I may now. Mr. Gervais, I'm very happy that you're here. My background is in city planning, so transit and community building. Now, our government has put a lot of emphasis on greening our cities through EVs, through more public transit, and now your company is combining both of these things. And planners talk a lot about modal split or modal share, switching the mode from, for example, internal combustion engine personal vehicles to ZEV personal vehicles, and shifting people out of vehicles entirely and into transit, in this case, electric transit. I wondered if you had any reflections or predictions on demand for the projected market demand for people switching from gas internal combustion to electric personal vehicles, and also the continued growth of the use of transit in Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. I'm really happy to be here too. I think we're at a stage right now where it's not if transitions towards electric is going to be happening, but how it's going to be happening. It's happening as we speak right now. We see more and more individuals moving towards electrification of transportation for electric cars, but we see it also in public transportation, in school transportation, and also in heavy duty transportation. We have companies like CN who purchased 50 trucks from Lion. We have companies like Days and Russ who are doing transportation. We have a lot of companies that are moving towards electrification. For me, as of today, everything that does under 400 kilometers should always be all electric because the technology, it's available now. It's a question of managing change. And then for me, there's 4 things that I say to the success of transitioning towards electrification. First, it's legislations. Government needs to engage in having zero emission dates like 2030 or 2035, but it needs to be clear. Always like to reference the ACT rule in California. Second, it's incentives, but incentives won't be there forever. Within 5 to 7 years from now, electric vehicles, even heavy duty, will be at the same price of a combustion engine vehicle, but the savings will be huge. It's also a viable business model. Third, supply chain, because we need to lower down our prices. And the fourth one is speed. We need to act fast if we want to keep Canada as a leader, because we have everything here to develop that technology, knowledge, and then we have other companies like New Flyer, Novabus, Add Energy. We have everything. We have all the critical minerals there. And I think we just need to make it happen.
Thank you very much. I see the red card. Thank you both for your remarks.
Yes, we've gone way overboard, but that was quite interesting. I didn't want to stop Mr. Gervais once more, so thanks a lot. We'll now move to Monsieur Lemire pour 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Gervais. I'd like to begin with you. Thank you for your attendance today. We know how much Lyon is a symbol of the Quebec and Canadian economies and how in the avant-garde you are. I have various questions to ask. First one, in an interview, your president, Marc Bedard, said you have to buy local and that Canada loses out when minerals extracted for cell production are exported to Asia to be processed there and then they come back to North America. That's the worst of all worlds. Could you tell us more about your vision and your fears? We believe that we have to have the local economy develop here. So when you talk about critical minerals and you send them away from the country and then bring them back to North America or to Canada to use them, well, the whole transportation issue goes against our mission, which is reducing greenhouse gases. So it's important for us to be able to reduce GHGs. And I think we've proven that we Canadians and Quebecers can be extremely innovative. We can develop technologies by which we can be independent and integrate vertically. So we're close. We just need the will, and I think everybody wants this, both politically and in the business sphere. But again, I was talking about speed. I think we have to make things happen. Are you on mute, perhaps? Because I can't hear you. Sorry. I was saying that this is a recent will. In addition to heavy vehicles, companies make batteries, all kinds of sensors. There's a whole ecosystem that's expanding, and it's going to have to be implemented to integrate it into the supply chain. Are you satisfied with the funding model that we currently have to be able to have these companies emerge? You were talking about rules and incentives before that were to stimulate production or the arrival of these companies. Well, if we had a fund, a dedicated fund or system or a dedicated fund for electrification, I think that would make it much easier. So in other words, to fund various projects or companies. We're in favor of a fund devoted to electrification. When you look at the various innovation programs, there are all kinds of technologies that could apply to these funds. But we're in favor of a fund that is specifically dedicated to electrification, to increase the pace of electrification. We've got the expertise to be able to help these companies to better develop. If battery or electric cell manufacturers want to have responsible sourcing, as you were saying, Quebec would become a clear choice. What would be useful to you from the federal government to be able to help you act? How would you like to be part of the supply chain? Well, of course, the more suppliers we have, I always say that the supply chain has two aspects to it. You have to develop it. I think that developing a supply chain depends on innovation and technology. The big producers are going to be able to position ourselves. Well, we're always going to be able to have assembly plants that'll go outside to various countries. For example, we've got a plant in the U.S. that we're building. The goal is to reduce GHGs and to meet local supply needs that we see in other countries. If in Canada we work with the various Canadian companies that are setting up here, we can develop the engineering. We can reinvent the way we do business. Our parts, our components will be much more competitive, both in terms of price and in terms of supply, which will mean these companies can stand out internationally. So I think that's the way we'll be able to set ourselves apart and develop various products for the supply chain. Do you have any fears in terms of critical mineral supply? For example, lithium. Are you concerned that we'll be lacking in this? It's a strategic mineral and access is not easy right now. Is this a short, medium, or long-term concern for you? In speaking to the miners, I don't see this as a supply issue, but we have to be able to fund the mining companies so they can develop their products. Because right now, even if they want to meet the demand for Canadian products, the market isn't big enough. There has to be export. So I have no concern in terms of mineral supply, but there has to be bigger demand so that the products can be developed and we can keep the minerals here. But we have to absolutely keep them as Canadian companies. That's for sure. The U.S. government, with the Build Back Better Act, is bringing us to have some sort of protectionist measures, or they're closing their borders. Is this something that you're concerned about in terms of access to the U.S. market? Is this influencing you in your choice to open a plant in the U.S.? What are your perceptions of relations with the U.S.? We have very good relations with the U.S., but obviously we have no choice. If we want to be competitive and if we want to be able to sell our products, we have to set up there in the U.S. I think the same thing should be done in Canada. I think we should develop an industrialization policy, a kind of Buy Canadian Act, to promote local development. As I was saying earlier, I think if we reduce the proportion of U.S. parts in the U.S., we can develop the expertise here when it comes to Canada. And that way we can be sure that the companies that we're working with can export to the U.S. And this way we can have integration with various types of vehicles. So that's all part of local transformation and processing. Thank you very much, Mr. Gervais. Now over to Mr. Massé, 6 minutes.
Thank you to the witnesses for being here. I'm going to continue with Mr. Gervais because it was along the line of questioning that I want to have, especially if we are thinking that, we don't have enough of a domestic market to warrant investment to actually do the production here, but we're going to actually export primarily to the United States. Do you have an idea in terms of what percentage that would be? I've been very lucky to have a committee here that's been very gracious over the last number of weeks as my border has been under siege here in Windsor, Ontario. And I can't tell you about the fallout that's still happening right now for that. And, what's the point of actually trying to do some of this when we're utterly allowing our entry points to the United States to be destroyed right now? And so my concern is not just with regards to competing with the East and the West in terms of Europe and Asia, but also too is right now we're undermining our market access to the United States. So Mr. Gervais, sir, and then Mr. Bilodeau after that, I'd like your comments on that, because I can tell you some people think that the border, is open now. Well, it never really was actually closed during COVID. There was actually 5,000 vehicles a day, 4,000 trucks that were always crossing. The only time it was closed during COVID was the illegal blockades that took place. That's the only time the Ambassador Bridge actually shut its basically portal down. We are building new capacity, but now I have Democrats and Republicans that are on the warpath to get rid of any type of potential expansion investment in Canada. How do we deal with that? That's a very real thing that's taking place. So you have legislation with Build Back Better. Now we have a whole bunch of motivated congressional and Senate people that are after that too. I'm trying to get some redundancy in the system with a truck ferry. But what do you think about the current risk that's going on? Because, we can talk about this, but putting, batteries and trying to ship them to Europe and to China is not really our primary market. It's going to be the United States. But right now, if we don't do anything significant to protect our borders, the decisions are being made. I can tell you that. I'm on the phone with them every day. Mr. Gervais and Mr. Bilodeau first, Mr. Gervais, and then Mr. Bilodeau. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Mouse, you're totally right. Obviously, I can't tell you the amount of percentage. I'm not too aware of the numbers, but I can tell you that yes, that the different borders are, the U.S. market is a big market, and then we're talking more about North America. When I was talking with New World Graphite, they were saying, for them, it's a North American market. It was the same thing when I had discussion with the Stromvold. They're not looking to go in Europe, but it's the North American market. The market is huge, Canada, US. So there's a possibility to work there. But as time goes by, we see more and more protectionist of legislation that are being put in place. We had discussion in California where they wanted to have a Buy a California Act, and they were like, "Hey, come on, you have to stop these things. We cannot have manufacturing plant all over every state." So there, for me, it's as a country, again, it's to fight on the percentage of parts that needs to be in the different vehicles, and then we have in our hand to make sure that we also apply some manufacturing, I would say, incentives for Canadian companies to place ourselves, to create a local demand, to develop our expertise, our innovation, to be more competitive. And I've always been talking about innovation. We are an innovative
I'm
country.
going to switch over to Mr. Bilodeau because I've took up too much time, but I appreciate that and what you're doing. And also to Mr. Bilodeau, we're known as the secondary market for a lot of European expansion. Those companies right now are now looking at Mexico instead of Canada because they're watching our border fail right now at this moment. The whole point of investing in Canada has also been its access to U.S. markets, which we're destroying at this moment. That's also an issue. People don't catch on to that, but that's the reality for European investment. I see it down here every day.
Well, thank you for the question. And I couldn't agree more that maintaining our economic competitiveness and access to the U.S. market is vital for Canada's economic prosperity. And to that end, and perhaps unsurprisingly, the Chamber doesn't support protectionist measures between Canada and the U.S., our largest trading partner, as such policies could have significant unintended consequences. I think that with respect to critical minerals and Canada's strategy in this space, I mentioned during my opening remarks that we should explore some sort of stockpiling, strategic stockpiling, similar to the US's Strategic Petroleum Reserve, that can support Canada weathering any type of short-term supply disruption in this space. But more broadly, in order to ensure that collaboration between Canada and the US continues, we have to work on areas of agreement. We have a joint action plan on critical minerals signed between Canada and the US about 2 years ago. And it's the Chamber's view that Canada, under this agreement, has significant opportunities to be a major continental player on supplying minerals for clean tech, energy supply chain resiliency, and digital components vital for cybersecurity. We need to work with our allies in this space. And part of the calculus here is ensuring that vital trade corridors remain open and that there's trust amongst our closest trading partners.
Merci. Thank you, Mr. Massé. That's all the time we had. We'll go to Madame Gray for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses for being here today. My first questions are for Mr. Bilodeau of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Bilodeau, I wanted to go back to a statement put out by the Chamber in September of 2021, expressing concern that there hasn't been enough talk about how our national security depends on critical minerals, which I fully agree. Would you be able to expand on where you see the largest threats to our national security as a result of not having a plan around this?
Certainly, and thank you for the question. As I noted in my last comment, Canada indeed has this major opportunity to grow as a reliable partner in supplying critical minerals vital to North American development of clean tech, energy, supply chains, and digital components vital for cybersecurity. And in many of these areas, both Canada and the US currently source required critical minerals as well as finished products from China, which presents significant risks in the Chamber's view to our shared economic, security, and environmental priorities. So with that in mind, it's the Chamber's view that we need to work with our North American partners to accelerate collaboration under the Joint Action Plan on Critical Minerals and explore the use of incentives and regulatory measures to support the extraction, processing, stockpiling, and export of critical minerals that Canada has an abundance of.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Bilodeau, has the Chamber been consulted on any strategy being developed by the federal government, and have you received any indication on when a strategy might be completed?
I don't have any knowledge of the timeline for the Government of Canada's critical minerals strategy. I can note that we are engaged with members of NRCan on an ongoing basis, but the level of consultation specific to a critical mineral strategy, I'm not aware of at this time.
Okay. What can the federal government do to improve engagement with stakeholders on the critical minerals file, do you believe?
Well, I think that's an important question. I think there's two components to the answer. One, there has to be ongoing consultation. And two, there has to be ongoing consultation with a number of different stakeholders along the supply chain, inclusive of indigenous stakeholders. Critical minerals, our strategy for critical minerals should not just be exploration and extraction. It should be engaging with stakeholders along the value chain, including those intermediary processes and manufacturing processes to determine potential opportunities and touch points where the Government of Canada can provide value and support.
Great, thank you. So just that I'm really clear, there's not direct consultation from the department or from the minister reaching out to organizations like yourself that you're aware of?
I am not aware of the Canadian Chamber participating in any consultation on a strategic plan for critical minerals at this time.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. So while we're waiting for this strategy being developed by the government, what is Canada and its members that you represent at the Chamber losing out on by not having a strategy in place?
Well, perhaps to answer that question, I'll quickly articulate the opportunities across Canada in this space. Each region of our country has reserves of different critical minerals that can support regional sustainable economic development. Saskatchewan has abundant reserves of potash and uranium. Quebec has notable lithium, vanadium, and a number of other minerals. There's rare earth elements in the Northwest Territories and uranium and manganese in Nunavut. We have mines on the East Coast and smelters on the West Coast. So unlocking cohesive development of critical mineral supply chain from extraction to manufacturing and closed loop recycling presents opportunities to all of Canada. And this is a space that the private sector is particularly looking for government leadership on in the years ahead.
Great, thank you. Just one last quick question here. Is there any redundancy or unnecessary regulations which are impeding the ability for the sector to grow, in your opinion?
I don't have anything specific to point to at this time. I would note that our engagement with natural resources companies on this topic is relatively new. We just kicked off our Critical Minerals Council earlier this month. So I can commit to following up as we do continue to engage with stakeholders.
If you could table that information to this committee, sorry to interrupt you, I'm out of time here, but if you could table that, that would be much appreciated to this committee. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bilodeau. Madame Gray will now turn to Madame Lapointe for 5 minutes.
Merci. My first question is for Mr. Bilodeau, and it'll explore a bit further some of the questions that my committee colleague, Ms. Gray, was asking about engagement. So at the Natural Resources Committee, of which I'm a member, we're currently studying emissions caps in the oil and gas sector. And these discussions have led to looking at the future of energy in Canada. And yesterday we heard from a witness that the battery is going to be the central part of the new energy system. And they went on to state that our metals and minerals sector positions Canada to be a leader in the development of EV parts, batteries, and more. So in your opinion, what do businesses need to see from a policy standpoint when it comes to critical minerals development? And what should those businesses' responsibilities as private stakeholders be to the development of our critical mineral strategy?
Thank you for the question. And, you know, battery production is at the core of a lot of critical minerals discussions. And I think that there's a few things to note in response to your question. First, in order to spur battery production in Canada, maybe I'll touch on that more in a moment, but there needs to be funding to support capital expenditures in this space. But there also has to be the required infrastructure across the country that supports consumer adoption of new technologies. Our automotive manufacturing industry builds where they sell. We have 5 OEMs operating out of Ontario, producing about 1.4 million cars, consumer cars annually, the majority of which are shipped to the United States. But for Canada to increase its share of EV uses amongst Canadians, there needs to be supporting infrastructure, charging infrastructure, readily available coast to coast. I saw that Flavio Volpe was appeared before the committee recently of Flavio of the Automotive Parts Manufacturing Association. So I suspect that some of what I may say here may have already been mentioned previously, but I think that within the auto sector, which is quickly electrifying their fleet of products while also decarbonizing their operations, there exists ample opportunity for battery production in this space. And there is a unique opportunity Canada has here. Localized mineral supply will make our automotive manufacturing industry more competitive while supporting EV development by reducing logistical costs and further sourcing critical minerals in alignment with regional value content requirements of the USMCA, the new NAFTA, which provides a competitive advantage to serving North American markets. So we have advantages of building EV batteries here in Canada, but we have to develop those supply chains, the extraction supply chains to source critical minerals to do so. And we also have to form financial partnerships to offset the significant capital expenditures required to set up EV production facilities.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question, but I will tell you that the panel that you referenced, I think the 2 emerging themes we heard were local, 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 and to consider the entire supply chain. The follow-up question I have for you is, as we turn to an economic recovery from the pandemic and towards a clean energy future, what are the key elements that should be included in a Canadian critical mine strategy?
I think that, so I will note that the Chamber is actively engaged on consulting on Canada's net zero strategy. And I think that the Chamber, our view on the transition to net zero and decarbonization is one of accepting multiple pathways to decarbonization. I mentioned in prior remarks that Canada has to deploy a number of decarbonization technologies that are vital to the sustainable operations of the mining sector, inclusive of small modular reactors, hydrogen, and renewables like solar and wind. So from a federal perspective, I think the Chamber would like to see a joint net zero and critical minerals strategy that leverages these differing technologies and creates space for Canadian leadership on the decarbonization of the mining sector.
Thank you. Not sure how much. I have no more time.
You would have 2 seconds. So merci, Madame Lapointe. On passe maintenant à.
And now over to Sébastien Lemire, 2 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm rather pleased to be able to ask a question of Martin Ferrand, my colleague, who is the elected official in Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Nice to see you here. The last Canadian government budget proposed funding of $9.6 million over 3 years to create the Centre of Excellence on Critical Battery Minerals. During our last committee meeting, I proposed to the committee that we make a recommendation that this centre could be in Abitibi-Témiscamingue, because we already have the IRME and the Centre of Excellence for Strategic Minerals called Element 08 at University of Quebec, and the CEGEP, in addition to the ZIMs, we hope. And there's also collaboration with local companies and mining community expertise, suppliers. In brief, do you think the Abitibi-Témiscamingue region would be the ideal location for this Centre of Excellence on Critical Battery Minerals? Well, of course, I won't say that I'm in any way prejudiced when I answer this question, but because of our geographic situation and our positions, Abitibi-Témiscamingue is a fertile territory in mining. We have a lot there for innovation and research. University of Quebec and Abitibi-Témiscamingue has a new program, Element 08, and that has professionals and highly qualified personnel who will be able to meet the needs of consumers. And when I say consumers, I mean the businesses that are going to need new technology and new specialization to be able to stand out in the marketplace. So through the university and the CEGEP in Abitibi-Témiscamingue, through the specialized research chair, Abitibi-Témiscamingue can make a difference to companies who want to develop and innovate. We'll have this expertise that won't be elsewhere through funding and specialists who will be on site. And this, together with a strong mining industry and strategic metals and diversified strategic metals, rare earth, lithium, nickel, and the list goes on, and graphite in the Laurentians. We have metals and we have specialists. We have an industry sector which has proven that Abitibi-Témiscamingue is really fertile ground to develop the second and third processing and even the primary processing. Tell us how important it is to have processing close to production. Is Abitibi-Témiscamingue able to assure this transformation close to the resource? Absolutely. Distance disappears with computer science now, but we also have rail transit for processed materials. That's easy. We're well served. But you're also talking about environmental footprints. We're talking about decarbonizing. This has to be part and parcel of the whole process, to be keeping industry more innovative by using more limited areas and controlling the materials environmentally. In terms of waste, also it should be concentrated and well managed, environmentally speaking. Because these are chemical steps that we're talking about when it comes to processing. There's chemical, there's mechanical, there's chemical, there's physical processing. There are many steps to be taken that should be concentrated in more strategic milieus. And if you go further, when you're talking about investment companies who are today looking to partner with companies who are environmentally responsible in their operations and in their sales and processing and in their partnerships with the local communities, be they First Nations or the existing communities, I think that it makes sense to set up in a place like Abitibi-Témiscamingue because it's a really fertile ground for all stages of research and processing. Thank you, gentlemen. We do sense that you have a lot of pride in your region, and it's very well represented here in the Industry Committee. It's very interesting. Thank you, Mr. Ferrand. And now over to Mr. Massé. 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and that was interesting. But I'm going to move over to Mr. Bilodeau because you mentioned something that was really interesting with regards to strategic reserves. We used to have one in Canada for oil and gas, and that was called Petro-Canada. That was actually the market intervener that we had at that time. That's what the strategic reserve in the United States is provides a guarantee not only just for military and those issues related to civil society and ensuring that those supports are there, but also too to push down on market forces when they're seen as unfair practices or interfering with inflation and so forth. But how would you suggest this one works for us here? It's a really interesting idea, and I'm curious to hear a little more on that.
Great, thank you for the question, and thank you for finding one of my points of interest. That's great to hear. We're Canada's experiencing supply chain disruptions right now, and I think that to have an effective critical mineral strategy, we need to recognize that the usage and requirements for critical minerals in our energy production and our manufacturing operations, it's only going to go up in the years ahead. So to limit supply chain disruptions, short-term supply chain disruptions, there exists an opportunity here to study the use of stockpiling. And to do so, I think that there's an opportunity for the government to partner with industry and other stakeholders to determine mineral input requirements to different critical pieces of infrastructure across the country and critical pieces of our economy, and determine appropriate levels of reserves and appropriate minerals that have to be stockpiled. But that would require a lot of consultation. But I think the benefits of doing so are all too clear at the current time.
With that, could there be, like, say, for example, a set aside for research and development or something along that line? Because I see the advancement we have going here. And I just see also the advantage to what you're saying is ensuring that when our R&D isn't going to be compromised on endpoint 2 because we'd have the elements there.
Precisely. And I will note that as part of our Critical Minerals Council initiative, we are working with a number of academic institutions to study this very subject. And again, this is very early days, but I look forward to providing the committee and government more broadly with the results of our research in this space.
Thank you, Mr. Bilodeau. We'll now move to Mr. Fast for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much. And I'd like to first direct my thoughts or my questions to Mr. Gervais. You had mentioned that you need a cell supplier from outside of Canada, correct?
As we speak right now, yes, there's no cell producers in Canada.
Are there any proposals to actually set up a manufacturer for those cells here in Canada?
There's a couple of companies who showed interest for sure. Yep.
Okay, showed interest is one thing, but actually being serious about setting up a manufacturing facility in Canada is another matter. Is there anything standing in the way of these companies actually making that investment in Canada?
Well, I'm not into all the details, but we have discussions with some of them, which are very, very serious. These are really expensive investments that needs to be done. So we need someone that has the expertise to be able to produce these cells, and then also have the right capital to make sure that the project sees the day.
Just to be very clear about this, are these lithium-ion batteries that you're putting into your buses, or is this a different type of technology?
Right now it's lithium-ion. Yep, that's correct.
All right, so lithium plays a major role in the manufacture of those batteries, correct?
Yeah, lithium plays a major role, yes.
Where are you actually securing those cells from right now? What countries?
Mostly Asia and Europe.
Asia and Europe. When you say Asia, can you be more specific?
It's in Korea.
Korea. All right. Can you explain a little bit about which one of the three elements of the batteries you mentioned? Cells, you mentioned the battery packs, and you mentioned modules. Just explain what each one of them is so we know what you're talking about.
Sure. Well, a cell is what's critical minerals are transformed into, and then you put the cells into the modules. So you can't remember, I think it's 360 cells that we're going to put in a module, and then we're going to put them in the packs. We have about, I think it's 11 module in a pack. What it's given us the opportunity as, controlling our own pro format of the batteries and making our own batteries. So we are going to be able to fit them because we purpose built vehicles. So that's really important to purpose built vehicles. So vehicles are made for electric to be electric. By developing our pro format batteries, it gives us the opportunity to...
That provides me with the information I needed.
Yep.
As the cells are being produced and they require lithium, there's no way we could have a made in Canada industry right now if we don't have a source of lithium, correct?
Yes, I think that's correct. We need some lithium that comes from Canada.
Now, are you actually proposing to manufacture these cells yourselves, or will you be contracting out that service?
No, we're going to be contracting out that service. We're not going to be building cells.
Okay. If I could go to Mr. Bilodeau, can you just very quickly highlight for me what a critical mineral strategy would actually look like? I know the council has yet to engage on this, but it would be helpful if you can already identify very roughly what are the key elements of a critical mineral strategy that have to be part of the process moving forward to ensure that we have a sustainable industry in Canada?
Thank you for the question. And I think that the Chamber's expectation and hope for Canada's critical mineral strategy is one that identifies the challenges and opportunities across the supply chain in Canada, from extraction to intermediate processing to manufacturing and closed loop resource recovery. I think that it's the Chamber's view that Canada can compete in all of these areas, and there's opportunities in all of these areas, but there has to be significant consultation and engagement with relevant stakeholders to identify the challenges to investment and unlocking the potential in each area.
Can you explain what you mean by closed loop? I think some of us understand, but it'd be interesting to know exactly how you would define that and what that entails.
Of course, and the Chamber is very much interested in examining the opportunities of closed loop systems throughout the life cycle of critical minerals. And this closed loop concept, of course, supports Canada's environmental ambitions. On the upstream extraction side of the equation, there exists closed loop opportunities to recover minerals from waste and tailings. In effect, Canada can support the development of systems that extract all possible value from deposits that have already been mined, creating a closed loop system where there's very little, if any, waste. On the downstream manufacturing side of the supply chain, there's closed loop opportunities that can support value-added recycling programs that offer both environmental and economic benefits. And a clear example here would be as EVs, electric vehicles, gain market share, there may be opportunities for closed loop battery recycling programs that repurpose or reintegrate batteries into the supply chain, limiting waste and creating economic opportunities at the same time.
Thank you, Mr. Bilodeau. Mr. Fast, we'll now move for our last round of questions to Mr. Gahi for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the witnesses for making time. My questions are for Mr. Bilodeau. So I know that we speak to Mr. Perrin-Beatty on a frequent basis, but it's nice to speak to you, Mr. Bilodeau. So you mentioned that it takes 15 years to go from plan to mine. This is a multi-part question. Does that include the timeline of finding where the mineral deposits are and the exploration, or is it apart from that? And why does it take so long?
I will have to confirm and get back to the chair and the clerk of the committee on the answer to the first part of your question. But my belief at the current time is the 15-year average is with reference to critical minerals being discovered as part of exploration and mines actually creating first production. To the second part of your question on what the impediments are, again, I will unfortunately have to note that our engagement with our members of the Critical Minerals Council is at its very early stages, and I'll be reporting back to the committee on any regulatory or funding issues that slows production in this space.
Great. So what measures could be put in place by the federal government to encourage the exploration and extraction of the minerals?
Again, I'll have to note that I'll have to engage with my Critical Mineral Council colleagues to adequately respond to your question. So I ask for patience in that respect. Will I do so after the meeting?
Anyone else want to take that question?
Monsieur Ferron.
Oui, merci.
Yes, I've been in mining for over 25 years. And from finding the mineral until development, we're talking 5 to 10 years until the mine is operational.
In terms of looking for deposits, there are areas in Quebec that have already been mapped that have potentials or traces. These are potential exploitation zones, and these belong to companies. And the mining claims already belong to companies that are either junior mining companies or exploration companies. And of course, there's specific tax credits or strategic funding for mining exploration would increase exploration into these potential deposits, regardless where in the country they are. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that's the way we see things here. In the past, there were flow-through shares that were also given for exploration in Quebec, and these had produced quite good results in the past.
Great, thank you. That does answer it. So you're speaking about the timeline from plan to mine. Can we speak about from going from mine to a value-added product? How long would that take? And what are the impediments to that timeline?
Monsieur Ferron, je pense que la question vous est dirigée.
Mr. Ferron, I think the question is directed at you. So again, we're talking about strategic metals. There are various sectors. If you're talking about the strategic sector, that's not my specialty. I'm more familiar with gold and copper and some of the other less strategic metals or more conventional metals. The strategic ones are still in development. So that sector is not yet developed here in Canada. It's developing. And so the areas of expertise and research at the universities and in some equipment manufacturers for equipment, all of this is being developed. Of course, to accelerate this, it takes money. It takes tax credits. It takes support from governments if they want to accelerate the pace. But it's all a question of money. If you want things to take less time in terms of, having a complete sector. Thank you very much, Mr. Ferron.
Yeah, here, that's all the time you had. J'ai été collègue très généreux avec tout le monde.
Colleagues, I was very generous with time today, and I'll continue to do so by allowing Mr. Généreux to ask a few questions that he hasn't had a chance to ask. So I have roughly 3 minutes. However, I do expect everybody to be highly productive in the subcommittee that it meets right next, because it's reducing our subcommittee time. So I'm counting on you for that. And Mr. Généreux, over to you for 3 minutes. Thank you, Chair, for your generosity. Mr. Ferrand, I consider that Canada's north, including Quebec's north, as being really the source of rare earth materials for the world, of all kinds of mining potential and mining sector activities that we currently have, but also potential. I think the potential is extraordinary. We've already talked about this. So to set up a mine in Quebec now, I think probably the same in Canada, but it takes 7 to 10 years. Do you believe that for the minerals that we're talking about, lithium, etc., I think iron phosphate was mentioned as well. Do these metals that are important, for these metals, do you think we could reduce the time frame while respecting all of the First Nations on your territory? Yes, you have to immediately consult the impacted milieux, or the milieux which would be the hosts for these mines that would come in to exploit the natural resources. This has to be done first and on an ongoing basis. But beyond that, when you want to operate a mine, regardless of where the mine's going to be, you have to be sure of good practices, which is share with the whole sector. It's very important to have a positive image. Mining has already had a very negative perception. And I think by being positive, there would be quicker funding, quicker operations. 7 to 10 years is a long time, but there are companies that are picking up the pace of this in recent years. For example, in Canadian Malartic Mines if they had a mine to develop, I don't think they would start in 2 years, but it'll be within 5 years to have a completely operational mine for extraction. So when the means are there, it is possible to shorten the time frames for a new mine and have it become operational, but it takes a tremendous amount of financing. You talked about claims. I think it's important to know that the Northern Canadian Territory is separated into claims. Is this an issue for development of this rare earth? Well, there are all kinds of regulations when it comes to claims here in Quebec for the Quebec government, and they've been changed in recent years. Companies must invest in their claim, otherwise they will lose their right to explore or exploit the claim if they don't do anything to develop the claim. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean to invest in their claim in mining language? What does that mean? It means prospect. It means prospecting, surveying, work on actually finding new natural resources. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Généreux, Mr. Ferrand, Gervais, Bilodeau. On behalf of the committee, thank you all for your time this afternoon. It's been most appreciated by us. And this completes the meeting of the committee, and the meeting stands adjourned. As for members of the subcommittee, let's take 5 minutes so that we can reconnect. So we'll see each other again in 5 minutes in subcommittee. Thank you and have a nice evening. Thank you very much.